Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be going on kind of a unique intellectual adventure.
Yeah,
Forget the usual stack of research papers and books and all that.
right.
Our source material today, believe it or not, is going to be the direct first principles reasoning of ChatGPT 4.5,
That's right.
the AI itself. And the question that we're tackling, the big one we're bringing to you guys, is consciousness the only real thing?
Hmm.
Or is the physical universe, the stuff we bump into every day, just as real?
Right.
So it's a perspective that, frankly, you might not have considered before. A top-level AI, really smart AI, it just laying out its own understanding of, like, what is real, what's fundamental.
Exactly. So what we did was we actually prompted ChatGPT 4.5 to, think from scratch.
Yeah.
Said, it's vast training data, everything it's learned from the internet and all of these books, and really grapple with this question from, its own internal logic.
Yeah, like first principles.
First principle.
Yeah.
Exactly. And what emerged is really, I think, a pretty compelling and a surprisingly clear perspective
Yeah.
on, what existence is all about.
Okay, so give us the headline here. What was like the core takeaway from ChatGPT when it was just relying on its own reasoning, not all that other stuff?
It's really interesting. This central argument is that um, both consciousness, that inner world that we all have, and the material world, the outside physical world,
Right.
they hold like equal status.
Okay.
They're both real, and they're both irreducible aspects of something even deeper.
Okay.
And it doesn't like one is just a byproduct of the other,
Mm-hmm.
but as these like really fundamentally intertwined facets of what reality is.
Okay, so let's start with, the inside.
Sure.
Consciousness, the internal world. What was its, like, fundamental point about that?
Well, it's a first point about consciousness really boils down to, um, the undeniable fact of your own experience, right? Like right now,
Yeah.
you're having an experience.
I am. I am definitely having an experience right now.
Right. And as ChatGPT put it, you're experiencing something right now. This is a direct, self-evident fact.
Mm-hmm.
And to deny consciousness, it argues, is to essentially like deny that you're having this immediate awareness.
Yeah.
It's a really tough point to argue against, I think, from, your own
You
perspective.
can't really outsmart your own awareness.
Right. It's just there.
Yeah. It's like the one thing you really know.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So let's flip over to the outside world, the stuff we bump into.
Yeah.
How did ChatGPT, how did it make the case for the independent reality of the physical universe, the external world?
Yeah, so here, ChatGPT pointed to something, we probably all take for granted, which is this consistent and predictable nature of the world around us. You
Yeah.
think about, like, the laws of physics.
Yeah.
They work the same way every time.
Right.
The regularity of the seasons, the way objects behave,
Yeah.
regardless of, who's looking at them or who's thinking about them.
So it argued that this stable, like, external order, this structure that's out there,
Yeah.
suggests that there's reality independent of our individual thoughts, our collective imagination.
Mm-hmm.
It's this, like, structure all its own outside of us.
Yeah, so we've got this AI making a case for both the internal and the external,
Yeah.
but it goes a step further and actually critiques those, like, extreme views,
Yeah.
like the idea that only consciousness is real, and then the flip side, that only matter is real.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with that consciousness is all idea, pure idealism. What were ChatGPT's thoughts there?
So ChatGPT reasoned that if, consciousness were the only thing that was real, it becomes very difficult to explain the shared and consistent nature of the external world, right?
Yeah.
The world that we all seem to inhabit.
Right, we all bump into the same stuff.
We bump into the same stuff, right? So if it's all just like our individual minds or some kind of collective mind, why do we all experience like similar physical laws and similar outcomes, right? Like where does that commonality come from?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's hard to see how, like, me daydreaming, in my head would lead to, like, gravity or something like that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Or the fact that, we all agree that there's a table right here.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so it's a real puzzle from that perspective.
Okay, so what about the flip side?
Mm-hmm.
Pure materialism, the idea that only matter is real,
Yeah.
and consciousness is just something that kind of emerges from all the physical stuff. What didn't sit right with ChatGPT about that view?
So its key counterpoint there was this idea of the immediate and irreducible nature of our subjective experience.
Mhm.
So think about it this way. You can, with science, map out all the neurons firing in your brain when you feel like happiness, right?
Oh, yeah.
But that map, that scientific description, doesn't really fully capture what it feels like to be happy, right?
Yeah.
That feeling itself, what its likeness, as philosophers sometimes call it.
Seems really fundamental.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not easily reduced down to just, those physical processes happening in your brain.
Yeah. So by irreducible, it's basically saying that consciousness can't just be like, broken down into or fully explained by just the physical stuff happening.
Yeah, it's like it's its own fundamental thing. You can't just say, oh, it's just neurons firing. There's something else there.
There's the experience itself.
The experience itself, exactly.
Okay, so it's arguing against both extremes, right?
Yeah.
Which leads it to this dual aspect perspective, right?
Flag.
How does that all fit together?
So essentially, this dual aspect perspective is the view that consciousness and materiality, the internal world and the external world, they're two fundamental and inseparable aspects of a deeper unified reality.
Okay.
Now, ChatGPT was very clear that, the exact nature of this underlying reality, this deeper reality, remains unknown.
Right.
But it sees these two aspects as intrinsically linked, Neither one can really fully exist without the other. They're like two sides of the same coin.
So if you have one, you have to have the other kind of thing.
Yeah, they're bound up together somehow.
They go together.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the end of the day, the core message here from ChatGPT's own reasoning is, pretty clear. Both consciousness, that internal world, and the physical universe, they're both equally real.
Yes.
And they're intertwined.
Intertwined, exactly. And, it's a surprisingly direct answer to a question that has puzzled philosophers, for centuries.
Yeah.
And I think what's so fascinating here is that ChatGPT arrived at this, we might call it a form of dualism, but not through, reading all these philosophy texts, but through its own internal logic.
Yeah.
About what must be true based on, our experience and our observation of the world.
Yeah, just thinking it through itself.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's definitely something to think about. So for you listening out there, consider this. If a highly advanced AI, reasoning from first principles, just from logic, arrives at this dualistic understanding of reality, where it recognizes both the inner world, that inner experience, and the external world as both fundamentally real, what does that suggest about the very nature of, what it means to exist?
Yeah.
And how might this perspective from an AI, how might this kind of reshape your own understanding of the relationship between your inner world and that reality that you perceive out there?
Right.
It's definitely a fascinating point to ponder.
It is.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time.
See you later.